I want to introduce you guys to the first episode of Let's Talk Hoops. Here with Kumbeno Memory and Chris Foss. Man, as we dive into the first episode today, we're just wrapping up the first set of live periods now, ending the month of June, the scholastic period. And as we talk about it, you're going to hear this phrase quite a bit that June is the new April when it comes to recruiting. So we're just finishing up the second weekend of live periods where in the past this would have been a dead time for players as they're waiting to get back from their high school summer leagues to finally get back in front of coaches with doing the AAU circuit. But we're now into year 5 of having the scholastic period where players are playing with their high school teams and man, getting hundreds of college coaches in front of them at these different events where we're having 100 150 teams that are there. We had a chance to be able to go to events here over the past couple of weeks that's there with it. But before we dive into that, Beans, just wanted to get your thoughts kind of on, June being the new April and some of the things you've seen from it and the importance of it.
Yeah, going up to the WIPCA event up in Bellevue a few weeks ago, one of the clear-cut things I noticed, I felt like teams were playing better together, and that the players individually were playing with more effort, playing much harder. And I don't know if that's the correlation of playing together with your teammates, that you're playing a lot harder for them. But to me, it was a lot better basketball to evaluate. Some would say watching the AAU and EYBL and the shoe circuit things that the talent level is higher, but you don't necessarily see the teams playing together as much and playing as hard, maybe certain individuals. So that was really refreshing to see that. And I think that a lot of individual players helped their individual recruiting based on those tenets, playing harder and playing together.
Certainly they did. I know we're going to dive into some of those players that caught our eye here in a little bit, but man, I think probably the biggest thing to hit on as we talk about June being the new April is just the shift in how recruiting's gone over the past few years, especially since the pandemic, where things were shut down, but then also the increase in players being able to transfer and the roster turnover that takes place after the college basketball season. I think we're 3 years in now where players having the extra year of eligibility post COVID and kind of that having that opportunity to be able to transfer has led to a bunch of spring turnover. And with that, it's caused college coaches to not be on the road as much in the spring. Most staffs, are having to be able to fill their roster for 6 months from then, not worrying about guys that may be on campus 18 months from now. And so it's shifted what April's looked like from that being the first chance for many players to be able to be seen, especially we're talking about the rising junior class. That opportunity doesn't really have the same value now in April as it used to have, which now puts even more emphasis on June. And I think kind of some of the same things that you just hit on it allows for one, that opportunity where coaches are just getting out there to be able to see them. They're now seeing them in a really familiar environment with them playing with their high school teams, which is now coming in at the end of that really busy month of June, where now you've probably played 20, 25 games with your high school teammates, guys that you were probably seen with the last time they had a chance to see you at state tournaments or holiday tournaments then in December, where now this is your new platform and your new recruiting springboard into July. It's taking place right before that there in the month of June.
Basically a season in June. I just talked to Sean Sturkle today, the head coach at Bridgeport High School, where I'm going to go do that defensive clinic this week. And he said, as of today, they're leaving team camp at the University of South Dakota, and that they had played 25 games up to this point. I mean, that's essentially a high school season. So look at all the learning, the teaching, the stuff that can go on during that time. The exposure now with this month being what it is, that players can be seen that much by college coaches along with their high school team.
No, for sure. And I think the exposure piece, man, talking from the college coach perspective, I think that it's really now the area where you're building out your recruiting lists. You still have some of the elite camps and stuff that take place during the month of June. Some of your team camps are still going on, especially down here in the South, prior to the two scholastic period that we had these past 2 weekends, where a lot of the team camps that still took place, where you're still having a lot of these same high school programs that are getting in front of college coaches and getting on their campus. But now you have, especially, this 2024 class, the rising seniors might have already been seen because of their roles they played on their team that previous year. But the importance now for your 2025, so your rising juniors, your rising sophomores, is they're probably now for the first time getting on a lot of these lists and radars, save for maybe the top 2%, your top 50 players that are in the country, some of your high major level kids. But for most of everybody else, this is where it's at. Diving into a couple of things, I know we talked about WIBCA. I was down here at the Georgia Basketball Coaches Association events that were here. But obviously the big beast where all this is kind of came from is Section 7 down in Phoenix. I know there are 450 colleges that were down there this past weekend. So now when you talk about getting eyes on players, we see where that value is sitting at right now for college programs, regardless of level, regardless of location, is they're ending up at these one-stop. It's kind of one-stop shopping events for college players, for high school players as they're looking to get college attention.
The same way that it would be for AAU tournaments. Remember, it's basically a recruiting hub, and now they're utilized. Remember, the narrative used to be, well, the college coaches aren't really looking at the high schools; they're really looking at the AAU tournaments. It's like, with this new movement now, to me, the value is on both sides. We can find value in playing in AAU if you're ready and prepared and developed. And regardless if all those factors are in, now they are watching your high school teams in the month of June. And it looks like every state has the state coaching association that is running those tournaments. Like you said, you went to the JIBCA, and I was at the WIBCA in Washington. I think that's really fresh, man. It's kind of like a Hoosiers type of thing, can give hope to a player that, like, hey, I'm just on the high school team. I can't even make the AAU team. They don't think I'm talented enough. And then here, I think there was a kid from like Utah who one kid fouled out from their team, and then he came in off the bench and cans a corner pocket 3-pointer. And it may look like a little skinny, frail kid, but here he is playing winning basketball. It would just be so fresh to see players that didn't have the opportunity to maybe play AAU that garnish and earn attention from just playing good basketball with their high school team.
For sure. And I know off camera, we had talked about a little bit about kind of the pride that comes with being able to play with your high school and those opportunities coming from a spot that there's some familiarity with it. So if you can expand a little bit more on that, what you were talking.
Well, just in terms, like the being able to play with people you grew up with, your friends. These are the ones that you're building chemistry with for years. There's a much deeper, a lot of pride. Like, if we would have had the opportunity to do this when I was back at Jeff or at Cleveland in high school, man, like the amount of pride we have for each other to go then out of state and play against these out of state teams is the same feeling that you have with playing AAU. And from what us doing I-5, like just that sense of pride, like you got a tattoo of Portland, on your chest, and you want to represent that and show that, man, we can play basketball around here. I just think it offers hope now with this scholastic event to other players that might not have been seen playing AAU.
Certainly. I know we've touched on it a little bit, but you haven't gone up there to Bellevue, the Washington Basketball Coaches Association event that was there, had multiple sites. I know there were teams from Oregon, Washington, Idaho, a lot of the Northwest that was up there. But what were some of your takeaways just in general with what you saw up there from the event?
Yeah, and there was some teams from California, but having the teams play new teams like that don't know each other, for the strategy of the coaches have to put things together and put the players in situations. The players getting to get challenged by playing new people, not just the same recycled teams in your area opportunity. but some of the players that were able to stand out up there, some familiar ones that I knew, like Marley Zeller, really made it. We've been seeing him develop over the years, but made a name for himself and popped the seal. I think he got an offer from Montana, Travis DeCure, and then shoot, I just saw today. I think Pacific and somebody else. You was at Portland State, so Pepperdine. So he's from the WIPCA. He popped the seal there. Jalen Atkins, man, looked really strong body, like he had used his time over this time because he didn't play AAU, and looked good. Still was scoring it big. Looked like he was taking the challenge a little bit more defensively. But one thing that surprised me is he had got a breakaway and went up and just kind of over the rim, but seeing it just looked different. We've known Jaber for a while, so to see the development.
And Jalen's a 2025. That's a
2025. Yep.
Came off of a really good state tournament run where
Barlow averaged 31, 32 points in the state tournament.
Yeah, and end up getting Barlow a trophy on a team that was really led by a bunch of sophomores, him and Mason Bierbauer, but coming off of that where didn't play AAU in the spring, Jalen didn't, and then kind of having that be first event, being able to be in front of coaches again. So like you said, there's that development period for kind of doing some work behind the scenes, and then next time he showed up was what you were mentioning there at the WIPCA event in Bellevue. There were some other players there that caught your attention as well?
Yeah, Mason Bierbauer, Murder Mace, who's on Barlow, knocking down some good mid ranges, just playing, looking more confident. You know how he had a good, strong sophomore season, had a really good Les Schwab Invitational in the state tournament. So seeing his confidence grow and just being like, I've been around the corner a few times when he's out there, looking really poised.
Mason's a 6'6". He's kind of a wing right now, developing more from being a forward towards a wing. I know San Francisco had offered in the springtime as well, which I'm sure, kind of popping the lid on that, as you said. Man, now you got the confidence of, all right, I know there's some schools that are out here that take what I'm doing and keeping an eye on them.
Yeah, knowing man, Murder Mace is going to be coming in the gym tomorrow. So I'll get to see him. So getting to help tap into that development. But he looked good. What's the other kid's name? Barron.
Braden Barron.
Braden Barron. Yeah, he's a new kid. He wasn't with the team from looked like they just picked him up here like in the spring. I don't know if he transferred in, but man, long, kind of lanky. He blocked some good shots. He had I think they played North Central, met the guy, Jacory, Irvin at the rim. So you could see the potential in him. I believe he's a 2025 kid as well. Got to see Central Catholic play. Isaac Carr, man, he's hot as fish grease right now. Developing, attacking the rim, playmaking, defending, showing a new improved body. 2025.
I know with Isaac, it wasn't from the WIBCA event, but obviously one of the things that caught people's eye that kind of got out this weekend was down there at Section 7, went baseline. I think surprised not only defender, but whoever was sitting there in the front rows in terms of coaches was going baseline. And man, Duncan won over somebody and showing some athleticism, I think, lends itself to what you're saying about an improved body, where whatever box people might have tried to put him in before, I think he's expanding where that box is and the parameters of it.
Yeah. And like I said, they had played against a team, North Central, who I saw that had two brothers, or the Irvin brothers, but the one that really stood out to me, Jacory Irvin, long, lanky kid. Man, he looked like maybe about 6'8", 6'9", finish at the rim. He had one where he dunked it backwards in traffic, but played with a lot of energy and passion. The body type kind of like a Jaden McDaniel.
Okay.
Yeah, long and lanky, but could move around. Like, this isn't who he's going to be, what we're seeing today. But it was surprising to see that. And then he had a brother about the same height who would look like he was a year younger. and they had a tough guard. I can't remember what his name was, but they had a really tough guard. It's about 6'2", 6'3". But coming back to Central Catholic, kind of a sleeper is a 2024 point guard, Tony Angelo. Strong, stocky guard, can get in the paint, really under control. But knowing Tony, having worked with him from the past and seeing his development the same way, like with Marley and Isaac and Jalen, getting to see, you know, like 6 years worth of development now coming out when it really matters.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fresh. That's fresh. I know, especially talking Isaac and Marley coming out of Section 7, which they actually won their bracket down there. Central Catholic did. Won the championship over Mojave, which won a state championship down in Nevada this past year. Talking with David Blue today, he said his phone is 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Been going crazy with both of these guys, which
new world for D Blue.
Yeah, man, things are like we talked today. I think it's kind of the part that you hit on. It's the refreshing part of the high school periods. It's, you know, guys that have been in that program for now going on their third year. And Marley and Isaac, I know it's third year now for Tony Angelo being there. And so you get a chance to be able to get the fruit of some of the labor, you know, some of the seeds that were sown a long time ago. I know Central Catholic's been a mainstay going down there to Section 7 and being in some of these events. Obviously, for Isaac, playing with Rotary Rebels 16s team, you know, you playing Les Schwab this past year for those guys as well. Like you've played in front of some college coaches. Now you're a little bit more ready to take advantage of what that stage is. If you're enjoying the Let's Talk Hoops podcast, make sure to follow us on social media and subscribe on YouTube for more content on recruiting, player development, team development, basketball IQ, and more at Hoop Dreams B-Ball and at Coach C. Foss. Now, back to the show. Well, I know there was another team that you had a chance to see at WIBCA, was down in Section 7 as well, from the Northwest that made some noise. Cascade Christian from down in Medford. I know they're, you know, from one of the lower classifications. They're from 3A, won a state championship here this past year, but definitely have some individuals that are warranting some attention, and that man, some of the better players that are there in the Northwest. What did you see out of them when you saw them up in Bellevue?
Heck yeah. Well, of course, they got that big fella, Austin Marr. That's how you pronounce his last name. But just does all the right things. Man, if he's around the basket, he's going to finish it really easy. He could dunk. He can jump hook left, right. Easy. He could shoot it out to the three when he was open. Made really solid, smart decisions. And I believe he's only a sophomore. Right?
So Mauer is actually going to be a senior.
That's 2024.
Yeah, so
Mauer got a bunch of heavy hitter offers,
yeah.
Tons of offers in the Pac-12 and everything. And then also, they got a sophomore point guard, Drew Hall, really heady point guard, man. Played under Detroit. I think he's maybe about 6'1", 6'2". Got good size for him. I remember I was busting Kendrick's balls. I was like, hey, man, you better look at this guy. This guy ain't bad. And then he ends up getting an offer from Idaho coming out of it. And then they had a kid who's an incoming freshman. What's that? 2027, Avery Hudson, and was very, very intriguing, man. Like, he's really confident with the ball in his hands. You could tell that man's done a ton of ball handling drills because he was able to go wherever he wanted to. He just got to settle himself down. But a lot of moxie, didn't seem fazed by any of the playing at the varsity level or anything. So I think he has an offer from UP right now, but I can see his stuff really like boiling right now. It's about to pop out. For sure. And I mean, you talk about not just playing varsity basketball, but your first varsity stuff that you're doing on a stage is against teams that are probably playing the state championship level in their respective states and classifications. I know that was the same deal when they were down in Phoenix this past weekend. I know their record might not have showed it. I believe they went 1-3. No, 2-2.
They went 2-2. They ended up getting the last one. So they went 2-2 down there, but really competed. And I think for all three of those players, every time you looked up or saw any of the updates, they were consistent in what their production was. I know we can look at summer basketball and say some of the numbers may or may not be inflated by you said we're 25 games in the course of a month. But if you're doing what you're doing consistently, I think that's the part that really jumps off the page, especially for guys that are playing up in what classifications are. It might not be not be for all of them playing up in age, but you go from small Christian school 3A here in Oregon. You go against the quote unquote big boys from other spots around the region. So that's a really big one. I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about, even though we didn't have a chance to lay eyes on them. But Tualatin, defending state champion from here in Oregon, I know they were up there at WIBCA the first weekend in June, and their new addition, Winters Grady, who transferred from Lake Oswego, Winnie the Pooh, who had man 6'7" wing, who really started to come on there the last session at EYBL. Really high scoring forward. He led the state of Oregon in scoring as a sophomore. And so him being there, Jemai Lake, who's Josiah Lake's younger brother, who now is taking over stuff, as a 2026 guard, played really well both weekends. But Jaden Stepp, who did not play in Bellevue, and then kind of jumped back in the mix with stuff in Phoenix, and it made a big splash when he jumped back in the pool. Made a big splash. Obviously, the big one is 40 points against Campbell Hall. Where David Grace, who used to be at UCLA and Vanderbilt and Oregon State, is now the head coach. Bronny James' younger brother, Bryce James, had just transferred over there and was playing one of his first events. And they have some other players that are there as well, but hung 40 in that one that really caught people's eye. Then started walking out with offers left and right, which I think is the biggest piece. From June is, if your phone's doing anything like mine, verbal commits is sending me Twitter updates, what seems like every 2 to 3 seconds. My phone's dying like crazy, and I'm not even on the horn as much as some of these college coaches are right now. So things are going crazy. Yes, I know the other one that you mentioned too was Ryan Lafferty from Mount Spokane.
Mount Spokane. Man, well, they had a really good battle against Central Catholic that went down, and he actually hit a buzzer beater on Isaac. Isaac had guarded him the whole possession about 15 seconds, kind of made him bobble the ball. He recovered it and then caught it and hit a turnaround. But, man, just an aggressive guard, attacks nonstop. He was in really good shape to be able to attack like that. Got in there and rebounded from the guard. He's about maybe 6'3", good, strong body. But, like, reminds me of them just kind of Joe quarterback, just like ready to lead the team, doing everything for his team. It looked like his team loved playing with him, and then kept his team in position to make a tough shot there at the buzzer, like seeing his moxie to be able to hit game winners. And I had seen him earlier in the year in practice at Rotary Rebels 17's practice and thought he was solid then. Same thing. I saw him there. I was like, whoa, okay. Oh, man, you didn't got better. And I actually got to see him, a glimpse of him in April at the EYBL in Phoenix.
Okay.
So that's too what is a good contrast compare. Like, I got to see the EYBL in April in Phoenix, and that's supposed to be the top shelf. And then getting to see the WIBCA in Bellevue, second, third weekend in June. Yeah, you can see that like the talent isn't as much. You don't have these guys jumping all over the rim, but I'm telling you, the brand of basketball almost felt like it was like a little mini NCAA tournament, because all those teams were in there playing hard for something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a feel you got.
No, I think it's taken a huge jump where they kind of got on board with what rest of the state association are doing. Previously, the Washington Association had just done an individual showcase camp, so it was like top 80, top 100 players.
Oh, so smart.
And now doing the team event, I think has changed the outlook on the event. I think obviously it's something where you're able to evaluate things a little bit more.
Way better evaluation from a college coach standpoint. I even was talking with college coaches there. Much easier for them to evaluate in those settings, and I can only imagine Section 7. I think that was probably even much more heightened pride playing for your team, that it just makes it easier. this is what the college coaches are looking at, what you're going to come in and do. You're not going to be able to wing it in plays and not rotate and stuff, but say I still had 30. You have to do these things that help you win games, and having those mini brackets like they did at Section 7 to create competitive spirit. It's a win-win for everybody. The players win-win, coaches being able to do what they're supposed to do, and then the college coaches win-win.
For sure. And I think the part you just hit on, the competitive spirit, sometimes we lose that in what you get with the AAU, because you have pool play, you have a prolonged schedule, they're doing it this way. You get a chance to see, like, man, when these players are in competitive environments, how do they respond? And I think that was kind of the thing for me, being at the 2 different weekends of the Georgia Basketball Coaches Association. The first weekend they actually did a Southeast regional. So you had teams from Florida, you had some of the top teams that were coming from North Carolina, you had teams from Alabama, and then obviously the Georgia teams. So you have kind of the top shelf of stuff that's down here in the Southeast part of the country. A lot of teams are just kind of talking with some of the other holiday tournament directors that were there, that they're like, man, a lot of these teams are going to be preseason top 25, some of them challenging for national, the Geico national stuff here at the end of the year. Because you have the Pace Academy.
I was gonna say you had the Pace down there.
Pace and Wheeler, who was in that mix this past year, and Norcross, and you talk some of the other states. You have the North Mecklenburg from North Carolina, like Isaiah Evans, who Duke signee or Duke commit, and Vernon Maxwell's son is there as well. And you have, some of the other schools that are down in Florida. The Oak Ridge, who actually was out at Section 7 the following weekend.
Yeah.
This high level talent. And then you have the Pride part kicking in because of the different states, but especially then even this past weekend, there was Georgia only. Just looking back through the scores from the games that I went to, and I feel like every game that I went to was a 1 or a 2 possession game in the last minute. And so now you're getting a chance to be able to see players in an environment that, you mentioned it being kind of a little March Madness.
That's how I felt.
Yeah, coaches that are down here, if they're not recruiting players that they think are going to help them get to that spot 18 months from now, they probably wouldn't be down here utilizing that time. I think that's where you reinsert some of the value in recruiting the high school players, because you have a real evaluation setting to be able to do so. Get back down here.
A couple more sleepers. I forgot that Wilsonville was out there playing Kyle Counts.
Yep. Mel Counts' grandson.
Yeah, man. He reminded me of the Tyke Thompson kid that plays at St. Martin's, but just man, long kind of Brent Berry guard. Yeah, we maybe got 6'5", 6'6".
Yep.
Then there was another kid, point guard. He was a lefty, number 1.
Callan Guttridge.
Guttridge.
Yeah.
Both of those kids stood out to me, and I had talked a little bit with Wes Pfeiffer from Western Oregon, and he had said he had offered both of those kids.
Smart to get on them early.
Yeah,
I think that both of those guys from this past year of making it deep into the state tournament, the 5A level in Oregon, had really good years. I think, looking at some of the guys that were down here over the couple of weekends, I want to hit on a lot of the Georgia 2024s, especially, just because I think that senior class get an opportunity to be able to play in front of those coaches. But the one who was from Florida that I'd be silly not to talk about, I know I was hitting some colleges about him as soon as the weekend got done. He's actually from Florida, North Broward Prep. He's by way of Brazil. So he plays on the under 18 national team. His name is Enrico Boreo. He's a 6'8" small forward. Watching him initially and talking to some people about him initially, it was him shooting the jump shot. And then as he got into the game, man, the way he was passing the ball and finding guys on cuts and moving without it, and then following back up throughout the rest of the weekend, had a couple of games at that size that was double-digit assists.
Wow.
And then pulling more film on it from stuff previous. You're seeing the athleticism of him going and dunking in the half court and doing some stuff. So he's definitely one mid-major coaches should be on. No, Jacksonville had just offered, but plays with Florida Pro, who's a non-shoe circuit team. So a chance to be able to get on him without being kind of in the rest of the mix. Some of the other guys that I really liked, 2024 kid from Alexander High School out here, Braden Lou, 6'7", 6'8" forward, kind of a 4-3, like he's facing up the majority of the time. But I think the biggest thing that just stood out throughout both weekends that he was in it was just consistently productive. Knew what his game was, knew where his spots on the floor were, and actually had, one of the better games of the 2 weeks. He had a buzzer beater that was in the sudden death period against Sandy Creek, who has another, 4-man who's probably going to the ACC. So you have players that are at a similar level that are doing it. Center spot, Matthew Hinton, who's a 2024. He plays with AOT down here. He goes to Dutchtown High School. 6'8", 6'9", doesn't score a ton, but man, was all over the glass on both ends and had a blast doing it. Like, man, he looked like there was nothing that he wanted to do out there more than go snag 10, 12, 15 rebound games. And the last one that I saw the second weekend, that's what he did, and had 7 or 8 block shots. It's has the body, has the length. The offensive game is still really raw. But man, he helps you win games at a lower level. But man, we saw Robert Williams basically do that with the Celtics the last 2 years. Because you don't need to score it like that, but if you're rebounding, blocking shots, you're making your mark. Couple of the guards that really stood out. Grayson has a guard, the 2024, who plays with the Atlanta Celtics, Jacory Harris. Man, like, you look at his recruitment, it's elite, but you talk about like athleticism, it's not like the highest end. Like, that's not what's coming at you first. But just winning play after winning play after winning, like on both ends of the floor. Like, go guard whoever the guy is late in the game to draw a foul and get to the free throw line on the offensive end. He's playing off 2 constantly. He's never rushed. He's not necessarily their point guard, but he's making all the decisions when stuff gets late. And the other one was Jeremiah Wilkerson at McEachern. So lefty guard, the athletic, and that's what stood out initially was the athleticism. Kind of jumps at you, even though he's a 6-foot guard. But like I said, there was a lot of these 1 possession, 2 possession games in both weekends, and just his understanding for pace, time and score, and where to get the ball to. Like, he wasn't sped up through those. He's new to that team, but like had a presence that was on the floor from the get-go. That's just like, man, you get into a situation late, 18 months from now, you feel comfortable the ball being in his hands, making those plays. Man, best matchup that I saw, though, this was heavy hitters, and there was some stuff to take from it, was Tyler Jordan, who's a 2025 wing, who's at Shiloh High School, and they played against a kid named Caleb Wilson, who's top 10 player in his class, 2025. He's a spitting image of Terrence Jones. This is a kid I was telling you about that plays and moves just like Jonesy. Man, kind of has a slow bop to him, will hit you with the slow shot fake and get to where he wants to get to. Incredible passer and feel for his size. But Tyler Jordan, who maybe a couple inches shorter, you could see the competitiveness with it. Like, man, I don't want to give another guy who's my class in my city the one up in this situation. So, it was really fresh to be able to see. Kind of these matchups transpire that I think, like you said, even with the WIBCA and Section 7, that you may not have a chance to see just different classifications of teams and, maybe from different areas, like the previous weekend, your weekend in Bellevue was kind of that same way. One of the things I wanted to hit on, though, because it is the kind of the first chance to be able to get out for coaches, try to navigate for players, for their families. Like, man, well, how do coaches even go about what games they're watching? Who are they prioritizing to see if this is their first chance getting out on the road? And I think from having done it, obviously it's a tall task to be able to do, because most of these events, you have 12 courts that are running at a time. You have prospects from 3 to 4 different classes that you're starting to look at and try to wrap your arms around. But I think, especially the staffs that had multiple coaches that were out, the ones that had 3 to 4, because there is so much to be able to tackle. But just kind of looking at and unpacking that, it's a lot of times it's a list that you've already started to build from the high school season previous. Some of those names that you've already had a chance to be able to get out and go see, especially those rising seniors. Like hopefully you've had a chance to see most of those at this point. And then as you're going through the spring, even though they might not be on the road as much, they're definitely tapped in. We're tapped in with the AAU coaches, the high school coaches, trying to figure out who's kind of that next group that's coming up, who we might have missed on that maybe didn't have as big a role, as juniors or sophomores in their high school season. But I think probably the biggest thing that gets a chance to come about from it, you mentioned the tournament format that was up there in Bellevue this past weekend in Georgia. The Georgia only event started immediately with bracket play, as did Section 7. Is you might have your list for Friday, and then someone's bound to catch your eye. If I'm sitting here and I have 4 courts that are going on each side, and I start to watch a half of this, and this one's off schedule just a little bit, so I look over my shoulder, and it seems like every time I look over here, he's doing something again. Like, man, all right, so I start to turn this way, and I can't go into Saturday without seeing more about who this player was who I just watched. And so those schedules get a chance to shift and to change throughout the weekend. I think that was one of the things in talking with a lot of college coaches during the weekend and then afterwards is you have so many of them. This is akin to what it is in AAU. As you start to see some of these guys, it's like, yeah, coach, I saw him. Man, you better get over there tomorrow so you get a chance to check out what he's all about. Because a lot of times, like we said earlier, with June being the new April, this is one of your first times as a staff to be able to go see these guys live and in living color.
Some of them, and like you said, with April this year, which made it a little different, some coaches were fielding visits because of the portal and whatnot, so they didn't even get a chance to go out like they would have in April. So like you said, some of them really this was their first time getting out. That's why I felt like I saw a lot more coaches out in the scholastic events than in some of the AAU events. I went to a couple during the spring.
UIBL session was a live period. You went to UIBL.
Yeah. And I mean, I know what live periods look like. In that one, there was coaches there, but it just didn't seem like the same number that you would do it. And I had heard from a lot of coaches that they were doing visits because of the portal. So things are changing. And now with the adding this scholastic, these 2 weekends or 2 weeks that they have that you can do that, this is just so much more opportunity that we were saying before. Maybe opportunities were lost years ago when they started cutting off weekends in AAU.
For sure. And now that these 2 weekends are over, part that I love about this the most is the recruiting periods aren't over. This is a natural springboard right into July. So we have, starting next week, this first set of live periods, all the shoe circuits go back in action. Peach Jam is down here in this part of the country next week. Adidas Nationals is out here. Under Armour has stuff. The independent events are going on this next weekend, as are the JUCO showcases. You have the J48 is down in Houston with New Balance. There's actually the All-American event is down here in Atlanta next week. So I'll be out there at that stuff and be able to kind of give some feedback next time we get a chance to jump on and have some of that. And so I think for players as they're going from one kind of setting into the next, biggest thing we'll kind of leave you with this. You got to make sure that now as you're kind of getting some of this attention that you've been hoping for, waiting for, preparing for, developing your games for, be organized as you can with it. Hopefully these players are taking heed to that and making their lists of who's contacting them, who's reaching out, but then also making sure like they're kind of prioritizing the things that they're looking for with their recruitment as well. Beans, you got anything real quick before we jump off here?
No, just being proactive with your recruiting, like you said, being able to articulate and be confident, and then, utilizing this June coming out of these weekends as a springboard into July. This is the time now to be very confident in what you're doing. We're coming to the last, run around the track. Take full advantage of this right now. Don't be nervous or docile about it. Be very proactive and confident.
I love it. And make sure you'll see right here ways to be able to follow us on social media and be able to subscribe to us on YouTube and stay tapped in. Man, appreciate you guys jumping on with us tonight. Beans, appreciate you. Look forward to having you guys back on again.
Peace.
If you like this episode of Let's Talk Hoops, make sure to follow, subscribe, and share to keep the conversation going.